I'm sure excited some of you to take some time out of your busy schedules to join us today. We're going to sit tight here for just a minute just to make sure that everyone can join, get settled in. So if anybody needs to, be sure to go grab a snack, maybe re-up on some coffee. And if anyone is located in Montana or the Northeast, feel free to go grab a jacket or a few blankets. But everyone just get comfy for what's going to be a great hour together. And to let you folks know, I'm coming from Bozeman, Montana, where XYPN is headquartered, and it's been absolutely freezing this week. And I'm not sure about you, Corey. I was going to try and make it into the office for the webinar. Then I checked the weather, saw it was -9 degrees, and at that point, had to make an executive decision and decided to stay home. So, um,
Totally. I didn't really want to shovel snow on my way into work this morning either.
No, there's one thing shoveling snow in 30+ degree weather and then snowing in -degree weather. So, again, thanks everybody for joining us today. And it looks like we are just a tad bit past the hour, and I'll get us started here. And my name is Chris Johnson. I'm one of the lead business development specialists on our XYPN sales team. And I'm very excited to be hosting this webinar titled Advice Advisors Need to Hear: Master Your Personal and Professional Wellbeing in 22 with our XYPN Director of Advisor Education, Corey Lennon. And there are a few housekeeping items I'd like to go over with everyone briefly. And if you could go to the next slide, please, Corey. All right, on the right tab, at least on the top, you can see that's the chat function. Right below that, that's going to be our Q&A module. So if you do have any questions for Corey throughout the presentation, please feel free to submit them there. And then we're also going to be doing a couple of polls today. So when you're prompted, please go down to the third tab on the right, answer any of the questions that Corey has for you. And then one last quick reminder for everyone is that we do host these free webinars every single Wednesday of every single month. So please be sure to register for next month's webinar, The Art of Delivering Ongoing Financial Advice, with XYPN CEO and our co-founder, Alan Moore. And we're going to be posting a link to register for that in the chat. And I think that's it for me, Corey. So I'll turn it over to you now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I see that we still have some folks kind of filtering in, but we are right at 2 minutes past the hour, which is usually my sweet spot. In my role as Director of Advisor Education, as Chris shared, I do actually help run all of the webinars that we offer within the network. That includes coaching webinars, that includes webinars with our technology partners, that includes CFPCE webinars. So we've got all kinds of offerings, much like this, for XYPN members. I did just want to share a little bit about myself because I may be a new face for some folks, whether you're a prospect or a member joining us today. As I said, I'm the Director of Advisor Education, but I've only been at XYPN for about a year and a half now. And I came from higher education. So my background is not in financial services or financial planning. I got my master's degree in higher education at Harvard before working in student affairs or student life and university governance. So that's really the human side of higher education. And that is where I spent my career prior to joining the network. So that included things like behavioral intervention and crisis response. It included employee communication. I did work around restorative justice and restorative practice and facilitation of dialogue. And so it's been really fun to transition to this industry and to see the way in which so many of the issues and challenges that financial advisors are facing relate to that previous work, that human side of any industry or anything that we do. And because I come from that background, that's really what I want to focus on today is the human side of what you do. It is quite a challenging time to be a human being, I think. We've all collectively coped with a lot in the last couple of years. And providing you some insight and support into how to take care of yourself and how to create some structure to be able to continue to thrive as a person and a business owner is one of my personal goals for our time together today. I will say that that is a big ask. Mastering your personal and professional well-being, I don't know if that's entirely possible, but we're going to do our best to give you some of those tools to work with. So with that, I just want to give a reminder to folks who have joined. Please feel free to drop things in the chat. If you go over to your sidebar, you can see right there, the top option is the chat function. Any questions you have as I go through my presentation today, you can drop in that second option. And we're going to launch some polls. I'll be interested to see who's in the room and what you are currently experiencing. So please make sure to keep an eye out for polls as we get to those as well. So I shared a little bit about what I am hoping for in our time together today, but I wanted to give you a bit more detail to that. So because we're talking about personal and professional well-being, and we're talking about that in the new year, I really wanted to touch on goals and think about some of those behavior changes that you might have been aiming for if and when you set goals for the new year. It's likely that by now, a lot of us have dropped some of those New Year's goals or resolutions that we set, and that's okay. Or if you never set them in the first place, it's not too late to do so. So we'll do an intro to goals and some kind of best practices from research around behavior change. I'm hoping this might be able to apply to you and or clients that you work with. And then I want to share 5 essential tips that I have for you to be more successful as a firm owner or a prospective firm owner in 2022, based on the year and a half that I've spent working with our expert coaches. And then we'll have time for any questions that you might have. And so that's what you can expect for our time together today. I mentioned our expert coaches, and I wanted to share the team that I get to work with in advisor education. We have 4 coaches in advisor education at XYPN: BB, Carolyn, Arlene, and Kathleen. As you can see, they are all experts in specific areas of practice management. And together, we really help members run a thriving fee-for-service financial planning firm. We also talk about that being a firm that they love. And that's something that's important to us, that you get to love the business that you run and that it helps you live a life that you love as well. And so that's part of why I'm talking about that human side of what you do today as well. And then Kim and Sierra are 2 teammates that really help run the show. And we have an online learning platform that we're currently in the process of redoing to make resources even more available and templates available and courses available. So Sierra and Kim really help with that. And we're also rolling out a whole new selection of webinars, workshops, sprints, and then coaching and consulting options as well in 2022. And so if you are an XYPN member on the call today, make sure to attend our February town hall on the 22nd. And if you're thinking about joining the network, I know our sales team is excited to talk about some of those opportunities that we'll be rolling out. We have 30 plus coaching webinars in the year ahead, covering all those essentials advisors need to know. And we're launching in the next month. So I'm really excited about that. And this is a pretty stellar team that I get to work with. To get into the meat of what we are talking about today, though, I wanted to just get a quick pulse on where we are at with our well-being. So I'm wondering if you could go over to that poll tab, the 3rd tab on the right, and let me know what statement resonates with you the most. Do you ever feel like you just can't keep up? You're so tired that even a good night of sleep or a vacation doesn't help? You dread going to work, or you feel easily annoyed by people or tasks? Do any of those polls resonate with you? Ooh, I see a "you just can't keep up" coming in. This is in the 3rd tab over on the far right of your screen. Do you ever feel like you just can't keep up? You're so tired that even a good night of sleep or a vacation doesn't help. You dread going to work, or you feel easily annoyed by people or tasks. I see quite a bit of annoyance here. I very much resonate with that. We use Slack at XYPN, and there are some days where if I get another Slack message, I feel like I'm going to lose my mind. You just can't keep up is showing a lot of responses here, feeling easily annoyed by people or tasks. Great. And so some pretty consistent trends here. We do see some people saying that they're so tired that even sleep and vacation don't help and that they dread going to work. But the top 2 right now, you just can't keep up, looks like it's our winner, and feeling easily annoyed by people and tasks is a fairly close second here. And so I ask this question in particular because each of these statements relates to a symptom of burnout. And that's one of the things that I will touch on in my tips later today. It's a topic that I feel especially passionate about, and that's addressing burnout in our workplaces. But know that if you identified with any of these phrases, that is a symptom of burnout. And you may want to listen into some of the symptoms that I'll explore later and look for the places that you may be experiencing that in your work life. It is likely that you are experiencing burnout if you resonated with more than one of those statements. Awesome. Thank you all so much. It looks like you just can't keep up is our top winner here. And that is helpful because that is going to be a major focus of what we talk about today. It's something I hear a lot from our members. That sense of overwhelm, there is so much to do that I just can't keep up with it. I don't know where to start. It's really hard to feel like I'm making progress. That is a very common feeling among entrepreneurs. It is also very common among folks in financial services and very common among helping professions. So, folks that work in each of those industries are more at risk of burnout. Overwhelm is a symptom of burnout. And if you are at the intersection of those three, you're kind of in the perfect storm for that burnout experience. I did want to share some facts with you, though, so that you know that you are not alone in this process. Since the start of the pandemic, the Harvard Business Review did a survey, and 89% of respondents said that their work life was getting worse. Another 85% said their well being had declined. So we are seeing huge numbers of people, huge numbers of working professionals experiencing declines in the quality of their working life and the quality of their well-being at work since the start of COVID-19. This is not surprising in any way, but I think it does help us see that it's not that there's something wrong with us. We are all collectively experiencing something really challenging. As that relates to goal setting too, I wanted to point out something that I found to be pretty significant. In a CBS News poll at the start of this year, only 29% of respondents said that they were going to make resolutions in 2022. That's down from 43% in 2021. So when we think about the motivation to do things, the motivation to set goals and make progress, what we are experiencing is likely impacting that. It is harder to be motivated right now, and that's okay. And we are seeing that across the board as well. So I wanted to address the idea of new year, new you. I think that is something we've heard a lot. And that can be really problematic. And we are not necessarily new people. But I don't think that takes away from the fact that goal setting, aiming for improvement, is a really meaningful thing for us to be implementing in our personal and our professional lives. And there are a variety of studies that show that people who set goals see positive impacts on their performance, on their motivation, and on their mental health. So when we think about goal setting, it's not just about accomplishing something. Having that sense of progress, that direction to move towards, does impact our performance at work, our motivation at work, and our mental health overall. Um, Even though that's the case, 80% of New Year's goals or resolutions fail within those first 2 years. So that is not a super promising number, and we want to take advantage of opportunities to increase or improve our odds there. And what I'm going to focus on today is the focus really because research also shows that folks who are successful resolvers, are applying more behavioral strategies to their goal setting experience. So most of the advice that I'm going to give you today is related to behavioral research, behavioral science, to give you kind of that strong foundation to be able to follow through on the goals that you set. And that is my next question. I want to know, did we set goals this year? So if you could head back over to your poll category and let me know, did you set any personal or professional goals for the new year? You should have four options there. One is setting personal goals, one is setting professional goals, one is that you really went for it and you set both. And the final one is no, it is exhausting. Why would I be setting goals in 2022? There are no wrong answers here. So let me know where you are at this year. Looks like we got a lot of nopes. We are feeling very exhausted, as that first poll question would suggest. Great. We're seeing some personal goals and some professional goals as well. Quite a few folks set goals for both. Oh, goals for both is climbing. Take another minute or two to get your vote in for me. Let me know where you are at. Okay, great. So it looks like the majority, about half of us, set goals for both. Another quarter or so set personal or professional goals, but the rest of us were too exhausted. It has been a tough year, and it looks like we are in the same boat that that survey shows. Setting goals is hard at this point. Based on what I shared on the previous slide, knowing that goals can improve both your performance and motivation, and then that can be a positive add for your mental health. I'm hoping that you can leave today potentially having a better sense of some goals that you might be able to set in the year ahead, even if those are tiny goals. Tiny goals are meaningful too, tiny habits, as you will hear a lot of researchers talk about. So that is something that I hope those of you who did not set goals because of that exhaustion today can walk away from this session with. It looks like we are now tied for the nopes and the yes for both. That says a lot about where we collectively are at right now. Thank you all so much for sharing where you are in terms of your goal setting. So, as I shared, I want to talk about what it means to set good goals and just quickly start off by saying what are some of the things that we get wrong, especially as it relates to some of those New Year's resolutions. We often set too many goals that are too vague. They might not actually be meaningful or interesting to us. And that's something that's often missed by the traditional SMART goals, which are looking at that specificity, that measurable nature of goals. A lot of the details of goals are captured in SMART goals, but they don't necessarily capture the meaning or the interest that we have in them. And if something isn't meaningful or interesting to us, we are not going to do it. It just doesn't align with who we are as human beings. Another thing to be mindful of is not just timeliness or time deadline, time bound nature of goals. It's also, is it timely for you? Do you actually have the capacity to do that goal right now? Do you have the time to dedicate to it? And then another error that we often make is not building in flexibility. We have a lot of things going on in our lives, and we never know when something like a global pandemic curveball will be thrown our way. And having goals that are flexible enough that we can adjust them as we encounter those challenges is really important. So, I'm going to give you a little bit of background here and then some tips around goals. There are lots and lots of books out there about this, and I have cherry picked my favorite insights. I personally am very skeptical of systems that offer a solution for everybody. And I think it's really important that we are able to customize what we do based on our unique needs, our unique characteristics, and the challenges that we encounter. So I'll have some recommendations for you for some favorite resources at the end. But I've kind of pulled my favorite tips for the next few slides here. The first thing I wanted to share is just an understanding of human behavior. And Carolyn, our marketing coach, actually recently wrote a blog relating this behavior model to RIA marketing. So I definitely encourage you to go look at that. It gives you another perspective on how you can apply behavioral science research to what you do. But for our purposes today, I wanted to share the FOG behavioral model because I think it illuminates what we need to be thinking of when we try to change our behavior, which is often what our goals do. So this model, which comes from BJ Fogg, who's a researcher at Stanford, talks about the fact that to change a behavior or to start doing a behavior, you really have to have three things. The first is motivation. That's your desire to execute the behavior. That's why you want to do this thing. The second thing is your ability to do it. Do you actually have the capacity to execute this behavior? That can be time, that can be resources, as we saw in that previous question, do you have the energy to do this right now? Do you have the capability or the skills? Those are all parts of your ability to execute on this behavior. And then finally, if you have motivation and ability, you need a prompt. What is your cue to execute a behavior? What kicks you into gear or helps you remember to do that thing? And so this model really says that a behavior won't happen unless you have all three of these things. So that I think is a helpful formula for you to follow. And I appreciate this because it acknowledges that there's more to behavior than motivation. A lot of times we blame ourselves if we are not motivated enough to do something. But it is a combination of our motivation, our ability, and a prompt to remind us to do it that results in behavior change. This is also something helpful to keep in mind as you work with clients as well. So I wanted to share that brief insight into a behavior model before jumping into some tips around how to set those good goals. And this is one that I feel especially important about right now, and that is narrowing your focus. It is easy to say that I have 10 things that I need to do for my firm this year, and I have 5 goals in my personal life that I want to accomplish. We are all overwhelmed. That is way too much for us to be tackling at this point. And so, narrowing your focus can really help you avoid that goal conflict and that capacity limitation that might come with having too many goals. And so I would recommend that you identify just one priority. You can list your top 5, but then pick the most important one to address. That is what your goal should be focused on. And whenever you can, focus on just that one goal at a time. There might be times where you have some smaller goals or habits that nest under that, which we'll talk about in a bit. But having that one focus at a time will really help you accomplish that. It'll help it feel more doable, and it'll help you stay motivated. And then finally, make sure that when you are doing this, you are measuring progress. We improve what we measure. And so making sure that you are tracking and regularly reviewing your progress will help you reach that goal. A good way to do this is to set up accountability with a social group. There is some research out of Dominican University that suggests that folks who set really specific milestones and then follow up and share progress, they're measuring progress with a supportive social group on a weekly basis, are more likely to execute those goals. So if you have a study group, if you join the network and you get a study group, that is a great place to have one of those regular touch points to help you measure progress and have that peer accountability, that social support to both celebrate that progress and identify issues when you are not meeting it. When you think about narrowing that focus, I often get the feedback that I can't. I wear all hats in my business. I have to have all these different priorities. And I really appreciate this quote from Seth Godin, which is, you don't need more time. He says, you don't need more time in your day, actually. You just need to decide. And really being ruthless about that priority setting will help you make progress, feel good about the progress you're making, and continue to be motivated towards those goals. I also encourage you, as you think about your goals, to get tactical. And this is a word that actually Carl Richards used in a meeting that I had with him back in December. And I really appreciated that approach of uh, it being tactical. I think about that in terms of specific or concrete. But tactical made me think about really how I am tackling something overall and the strategy involved in that approach. So that's how I want you to think about your goals, is really get into that nitty gritty strategy for what it will look like to execute this. And part of that should be to create your implementation plan or your implementation intention. That is your when, where, and how. If you outline your when, where, and how, if you say, I'm going to do X on this day at this time in this way or in this place, you are 2 to 3 times more likely to stick with that. I think that level of detail is something we don't always immediately leap to, and the fact that it can make that much of a difference is really meaningful. The second thing I recommend you do to get tactical is to identify those systems that you need to accomplish this goal. If you are looking to bring on 5 new prospects or 5 new clients in the next month, that's a big goal. Do you have the systems in place to do that? Do you have a sales process? Do you have the tools within that process to achieve that goal? If you're trying to achieve something but you don't have any systems in place, it's going to feel much more overwhelming. And we provide a lot of those systems in advisor education. It's one of the things that I appreciate most about my team. But when you are looking at that goal, think about the systems that you need to have to do it. And if you don't have them in place, make sure that you outline those and you have that smaller structure or those tinier behaviors or actions that will help you get to that goal. And then finally, use anchor behaviors. This is something that BJ Fogg talks about, and that is taking something that you already do and using that as your prompt for your new behavior or habits. That might be having your morning coffee, something you do every day. What is the behavior that you can add onto that? So that when you do this behavior every day, you have your coffee, all of a sudden you are checking your LinkedIn and reaching out to a new networking connection. You are reading a new blog post to get an idea for your business. What are those small things that you can anchor to an existing behavior to act as your prompt? At any time you can, look for that existing behavior to use as an anchor, whatever that might be for you. And then I have a few just little pro tips to give yourself a boost. Change is hard, and it's not something that happens once and then we move on from. This is an ongoing process. And even when we use all of these hacks, we take advantage of all the behavioral tools that we can, it's still going to be difficult. So know that going in, it's going to be ongoing, it's going to be challenging, and you're going to be able to do it anyway. But a few tips for you in that process are to use temporal landmarks. This is something that Katie Milkman, who's an economist at Wharton, first talked about. And that is the fact that when we experience temporal landmarks, which are things like birthdays, the new year that we just had, even the start of the new month yesterday, or the start of a new week every week, those give us a fresh start effect. When we have this little surge of motivation on a temporal landmark, it can help us move forward with our goals. So take advantage of those. It's okay if you need to restart next Monday or the start of next month. That is part of the process. You can also use deadlines as it relates to temporal landmarks as motivation as well. Maybe you want to do this by your first anniversary of launching your firm. Maybe your 3-year anniversary in your current position is when you want to have this plan for creating your own firm completed. So you can kind of use it as a fresh start and or a deadline that makes a difference. I actually just used this myself for my first marathon. I read that you are more likely to complete a marathon when you are 29, 39, 49, or 59. And I scheduled a marathon for the week before I turned 30. And I almost didn't make it. It was a really hard, not very fun training process, but using that temporal landmark was really motivating for me in that goal process. I also used quite a few of these other behavioral strategies to get to that personal goal. Some other tips here are to make sure that you are celebrating. And this also relates directly to burnout. Celebrate even the tiniest wins that you have. I got up today and I went on a walk. That was a big deal. I have not been getting outside when it's -9. I've been trying to get more movement. That was a big win for me. That helps me be more prepared for this webinar. It helped clear my head in advance of this. That is a tiny thing that I did to have a better day today. It's not in line with my goal of running my next marathon this summer, but I'm proud of that win. So take the time to celebrate, and whatever that means for you, even if it's just like a woohoo, I did it. It can be a text to a friend or family member, to a colleague who supports you, but celebrate those wins, even the tiniest ones. That boosts your motivation and helps beat burnout. And then finally, keep good company. Your peers have more of an influence on your ability to achieve your goals than almost anything else. And that is a really important factor to be mindful of. If you are launching your own firm, you might not have the same peer group anymore, or you might have access to a peer group that doesn't understand your current experience and can't help motivate you. This is something I really encourage folks who join the network to leverage. That's our study groups, our accountability groups as they launch. That community and that productive, supportive community that understands what you're going through and can challenge you to continue to grow makes a huge difference in goal achievement. So I shared the general tips I have around goals. Those are my favorites when it comes to achieving your goals in 2022. But I also just wanted to share some specific ones for your firm. If you're thinking about launching a firm or if you currently have a firm, these are some of the things that I would recommend. And I'm really going to get back to basics here. I do think that less is more, especially in the year that we are currently living in. We are exhausted, as we saw in that poll, and focusing on these fundamentals, I think, is a really excellent place to start. That's whether you're preparing to launch your firm or if you've had a firm for a year or two and you just need to refine. These are 5 tips that I have for you. And so we talked about those goals. Setting strong goals, I think, is a really key part of this. Use the tips that we just talked about. And then I have a final kind of pro tip from one of our coaches. Carolyn, our marketing coach, talks about creating a pair of goals. And I really appreciate this approach. One of those goals should be actionable. That's something that you directly control. And the other should be a goal that you influence. It should be an assertion goal. And when you think about this, that might be that I want to increase traffic on my website by 15%. That is my assertion goal. I'm going to try to influence that. But my actionable goal is that I'm going to write one blog post a week by Thursday at 2 p.m. to put on my website. That is something I have control over, I can track progress for, and it hopefully will influence my assertion goal. But having that pair, something that you are trying to influence and something that you have direct control over, can really help with motivation and that sense of progress as you move forward. This is just a personal tip that I have seen as I work with members is anytime that you are doing this, it is likely that you are following a process. Document that process as you go. If it fails, or if it succeeds 3 months from now, 6 months from now, you want to be able to go back and either diagnose what went wrong or replicate it. And a lot of our members don't have time or they don't feel they have time to document a process, which makes it a lot harder to evaluate later on. It also makes it a lot harder to outsource, which you will likely want to start doing with a lot of these processes. So be documenting along the way. That proactive work will make a huge difference for your success going forward. I also just wanted to share some questions to ask to help you set good goals. These are things that I would ask myself when I'm setting a goal. To get at that sense of motivation and that meaningfulness to me, I'm going to ask, why do I want to do this? Why is this important to me? And come up with at least 3 reasons. I'm also going to tie it to who I want to become. Who am I if I achieve this goal? Who do I want to be? Who will I be when I achieve this? What will it feel like? What will my life look like? I'm using my marathon as an example today. I ended up writing, I will be a marathoner. I am a runner. And that made a huge difference in that final stage of training when I was really struggling. And so, who do you want to become? Maybe that's you want to become a more dedicated person. You want to become a marketer. You want to become a firm owner. What does that look like for you? What is that identity or part of your identity that you can link a goal to? An identity based goal can be much more motivating. You also want to think about what skills will this require? And to get at the fact that you might not have the capacity now, but you can build it, and to see if the goal is difficult enough. I mentioned SMART goals earlier. I actually like hard goals better. And one of the requirements for that is that it's difficult. If you don't feel a goal is challenging, it's probably not going to be engaging for you. So, do I have to develop at least one new skill to do this goal? And does it require too many skills for me to be able to develop right now? To get at that sense of celebration, too, I want to ask myself, will this goal be rewarding? And if it's not rewarding in and of itself, how am I going to reward myself? How am I going to celebrate? Feeling that sense of reward is also tied to burnout. So if you are not building in that celebration and reward, it's more likely that you're going to burn yourself out in the process as well. And then finally, that timing I mentioned earlier. Do I have the time or resources to commit to this? Is the timing right now, or is this going to be something that I need to plan for in the future? So these are some questions I would ask myself to make sure I'm setting a good goal as I go forward. Another tip that I have for you is to really establish a cadence. I think it can be easy to get lost in the nature of day to day work and just do things as they come up. And I encourage you to take control of your calendar. To me, that means blocking my schedule and setting aside specific days for meeting, specific days for meeting prep. And that also means that I tend to block most of Monday and most of Friday for just focused work time. A helping profession and a knowledge work profession like you all have, like I have, requires that free space to think. It also requires rest. So if I can't rest my brain, I'm not going to be able to create the learning experience or the financial plan that best meets my clients' needs. So I encourage you to block your calendar and set aside specific times for specific work. But also take advantage of that to set aside time to work on your business. Arlene Moss, our executive business coach, recently said to me that she encourages members to block at least 2 hours a week to work on their business. That's to think about these goals, to revisit your goals, to make progress, not just to be supporting clients. And so I definitely encourage you to do that and actually use it. A lot of times we block that time and then we let it fill with administrative things we need to do. And then I would also set aside one retreat day per quarter. If you are an XYPN member and you are interested in uh, an outline for what that retreat day would look like, I would love to outline that for you. Let me know either in the chat or after this. But I would set aside that day to really evaluate what we are talking about, assess the progress you've made on your goals, set new goals, and reconnect to your why, which is what I will talk about next. Developing your why, honing your why, I think is one of the most important things that I recommend you do, both as you get started and about a year or so in. I think it can be hard to have a well developed why early on. You're just trying to figure it out. But if you do some of that work to develop that conviction, that clarity, or that focus and purpose is another way I think about it, that intentionality behind what you do, that will help with all of those decisions that you have to make along the way and can really help you cut the overwhelm. You starting with that early means that it may change. It should change as you learn and grow as a firm owner. But having that time to be reflective, to go back and focus on your why is something I recommend you start doing even as you're planning to launch your firm, and that you consistently go back and revisit in those quarterly retreats. And as you learn lessons and continue to make adjustments to what your goals are, who you serve, and what your firm looks like. I do have a little bit of a reflection that I created at the start of this year for members and that Audrey will be sharing with you after this webinar. But it does just give you some questions to be asking yourself. This would be something that you could use at a retreat, but thinking about that why do you do this work and really honing in on that. Thinking about some of the different aspects of your work if you currently have a firm, your clients, your workload and balance, goal review, and then new goal setting. And so this is an area, or this is a resource that will be available to you regardless of whether or not you are an XYPN member. And I encourage you to use this as you do some of that goal setting. Kent, I see you're interested in a quarterly retreat. Awesome. I will see if I can put that together in the next couple of weeks. The other thing that I recommend that folks do in this process of really honing those essentials is defining that ideal client or that ideal prospect. It is pretty startling to our team how many folks are launching a firm with just a general idea of who they want to serve, and getting into the level of detail that we recommend to build an avatar to really define that ideal client or prospect helps you cascade so many other decisions. When you have a clear outline of that person, what motivates them, where they spend time, what they are interested in, then you can think more about the services that they need and craft your service model to that. What messages resonate with them, where you find them for your marketing, what planning issues they face that you need to be prepared for, and what their price point is so that you can sustain your firm and grow your revenue in a way that makes sense for you. So doing the work to define your ideal client dictates a lot. And this is something that we do in network. As folks go through preparing to launch, we start work around defining their ideal prospect avatar, and we continue to revisit that throughout the time that they're working with us in advisor education. So you can find a lot of resources out there on the internet about your ideal prospect, your ideal client avatar, and I would definitely do the work to start defining this earlier and revisit it often as well. Why is that important? I just wanted to highlight our benchmarking study is consistently showing that folks who have that really clear focus, they have developed a niche, whatever that means to them, are seeing higher revenue even in the earlier phases. This used to be something we didn't see till later firm phases, but even when folks are in that implementing phase now, we are seeing higher revenue for folks who have a niche, who have that clarity, who have that focus, and are able to really intentionally serve a community. The last thing that I wanted to share today was just to watch for burnout. I think we saw that with that overwhelm question. A lot of us are feeling burnout. It sneaks up on you, and watching for symptoms and immediately taking action will make a huge difference for you as a firm owner or a prospective firm owner. So, what are those symptoms you should be looking for? Exhaustion. There are, just to clarify, there are three symptoms of burnout. You have to be experiencing all three to be experiencing burnout. Burnout only takes place at work. It is a workplace phenomenon. I have the definition on here. The World Health Organization acknowledged it as a syndrome in 2019 and defined it as a syndrome that results from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. So it happens in our workplaces. And one of the unique opportunities for XYPN members is that you are running your own workplace. So you have special control over the circumstances, the environment that you work in that so many other folks don't. If you are looking at becoming a member, it's possible you work in a workplace where you don't have that control. And that is part of what's contributing to your burnout. We heard that from a lot of members when I presented on this topic at XYPN Live this year. That's part of why they made the transition. The environment was not healthy and it was causing them to burn out. But you can experience it even in your own environment, and taking action in advance to head that off is important. So if you find yourself experiencing exhaustion, which is that mental, physical, and emotional exhaustion, I just can't do this anymore. That question around feeling tired even after a vacation or a good night of sleep gets at this. That is a real key indicator. And this usually shows up first. The second symptom is cynicism. This is when you feel detached, annoyed, frustrated, or resentful. Another way of describing this is depersonalization. You might no longer feel as connected to your work as you once did. I heard from our team at XYPN when I presented on this last week that they were feeling just like, I used to love my job and I don't anymore. Since the pandemic started, I miss that. And I think a lot of us have experienced that. I love what I do, but I haven't been loving it lately. I feel detached or it doesn't feel the same way. And that's normal. A lot of us are experiencing that. That's a symptom of burnout. And then finally, inefficacy. That sense of being overwhelmed that we saw in that question is getting at this inefficacy. And it can come in two ways. One, you can just feel ineffective, you can feel overwhelmed, feel like you're drowning, feel like you're unproductive, or you might actually be more unproductive. You might be making more mistakes at work. You might be taking more time to do things. But that sense of either feeling or falling behind is the third symptom of burnout. If you are burned out, you will experience all three, but everyone's burnout profile is unique, and this will look different for you. I personally tend to be really exhausted, and then cynicism hits me pretty hard. Inefficacy shows up in small ways, but it's not something that is as present for me. So be mindful of how this might look for you and look for each of those symptoms. When you do that, there are 6 causes that you can identify. I'm not going to get into them today because we're coming to the end of our time together. But know that you can go looking for those 6 causes of burnout and address those causes or mismatches to help alleviate each of these 3 symptoms that might be showing up for you. Something that I just wanted to share based on the conversations that I have with members is to ask yourself, why am I doing this? If you are feeling like you should do something, if you are feeling overwhelmed, if you are feeling like there's a lot on your plate and you're saying yes to something or you're doing something, ask yourself why and examine that motivation. Am I guilty? Am I worried I won't be enough? Am I afraid of failing my clients? Am I afraid of failing as a business owner? Am I afraid of making someone angry? If my decision to do something is coming from a place of guilt or shame, I take a step back and evaluate whether or not that's something I should be doing in the first place. And that can be having a meeting, that can be sending an email, doing a follow up. I want to look at my own motivation in that process of deciding what's important and evaluate whether or not I'm doing it for the right reason. And so I encourage you to ask yourself these questions as well. And the last thing I wanted to really ask is what do you feel like is the most important thing, not that you should do, but that you need to do or want to do in 2022 to prepare for, to launch, or to grow your firm? Would love to see some answers in the chat. What is the most important thing you need to or want to do in 2022? I don't want this to be a should do. Please drop some things in the chat for me. I'll give just a minute for folks to type some things in. And I'll share some things my coach has recommended too. BB Webb, our sales coach, suggested that members implement one touch point a month with their clients, whether that's an email newsletter, a holiday greeting, the planning meeting that you have. Look at your calendar and pick one touch point a month to be maintaining that relationship. Arlene, as I shared, uh, suggested scheduling 2 hours to work on your business instead of in your business. Carolyn suggested setting those two goals, using two goals, the one you can control and the one you're trying to influence. And Kathleen, our financial planning and process coach, really focused on process. She suggested that you revisit or review one of your processes, one of your workflows each week, decide if it's still working for you, and make sure that it's documented in a way that is effective. Oh, I love the one that just came in. Finding a financial planning firm to work at after graduation in May. That is such a good goal, Peter. Following up with existing clients, creating your marketing plan and executing it. That is huge. Working with Carolyn, our marketing coach, is a great resource for that. We are launching new consulting options for members who are interested in just a brief consult with an expert as well. Awesome. Well, the last thing I wanted to share here was just some of the resources that we talked about today. I pulled most of the information that I talked about, at least either directly in terms of tips or inspiration, especially around your why, from these 4 books. How to Change is a new book that I especially recommend. As I shared, Katie Milkman is an economist. And this book really addresses what those challenges that you specifically might face in implementing change and achieving a goal, and tips to get around them. So if you are looking at one thing to engage with to help make change to achieve your goals, that could be a great book. If you are interested in more, sometimes I like the Spark Notes though, so please feel free to just use what I covered today. No pressure to actually read the full books. And with that, I would love to hear any questions that folks have today. Thank you all so much for your time and attention.
Yes, great job today, Corey. And it looks like here, I'll make publish this real quick. It looks like we did have one question from Peter Cruz. What are some examples of popular niches for firms that you've seen, Corey?
Mm. I think we have a lot of popular ones. They are often related to professional groups, firefighters. Sometimes I have worked with one member who worked with volunteer firefighters. I think that was really cool. Teachers, nurses, doctors who have significant amount of student loans. So a lot are professional related. Other members are working with kind of that identity related niche, young families with children, um, different opportunities like that. I would also say though that picking a general category because it's popular is probably the last thing I would do. I would look at what you are interested in,
Mhm.
what you have expertise in, whose experiences you know and identify with, and who you can best serve. And really use that as a starting place. Use yourself as a starting place because you might be able to connect with folks not just based on some part of their identity or some professional category, but based on the way that they want to interact with their money, that more psychological or psychosocial connection to what they do. So I wouldn't look at other people's niches so much as looking at yourself and finding those groups that you know and understand and can really support in a meaningful way. Because that's where you're going to find the most success when you can tap into someone's needs and really deliver something that is unique to them and to you and that you enjoy. Because if you don't like your niche, that's not going to be any fun to serve either.
Absolutely, absolutely. Great question, Peter. Just finding something that resonates with you, finding something that interests you. I would definitely agree there, Corey. And then a few more questions that we do have. One that came in is, what kind of resources do you recommend for finding a social group to hold myself accountable to my goals?
Mm. I love that question. I think within the network, it's something that we build in really intentionally. In our Preparing to Launch program, we have members working in small groups throughout the 4-week coaching call series that we have. And then we launch them into an accountability group where they work for 6 weeks through launch curriculum. And then they can have the opportunity to join a study group. If you are a part of another organization at this point, I would look for study groups, knowledge circles, mastermind groups. I think those are great opportunities for you to connect with those kind of small communities that can help hold you accountable. And that can be both in the financial planning profession. It might also just be in your local community. I know that some chambers of commerce, some different business organizations have those opportunities as well. And that can also be a great way to start building some of those networking connections that can help you tap into new clients and identify centers of influence, which is something we also talk a lot about in terms of helping advisors build their sales funnels. So I would look in all of those different areas at this point.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Corey. Another question that we had was broadly speaking, how would you structure a team retreat?
Ooh, how would I structure a team retreat? I have run a lot of retreats in my time. It's one of my favorite things to do. Um, And I think it depends on how long you want it to go. If you're gonna be really intensive and do a full day, I think that's a different experience. I have even found even 2-hour retreats to be meaningful. Each quarter with my own team at XYPN, we have an hour and a half one day where we talk about what we have done in the last quarter. Everyone shares a kind of personal win or a personal point of pride. I like to focus on what we are proud of, a
Mhm.
professional point of pride, and then what they accomplished in terms of their goals for that quarter. And then we usually do like a fun question. This last quarter, I asked about where they experience awe in their life.
Mm,
Awe is a way of avoiding burnout. It is also a positive emotion. And when you focus on positive emotions, that helps with mental health. So we all shared a story of a time that we experienced awe as a way to continue to connect as a team. Um, then the second day, we really focused on goals. What was the most important thing that we as a team needed to address in the quarter ahead? What were the pieces that we each needed to do to get there? And what were individual things that each of my teammates needed to do in the goal ahead, the most important thing? And then we set those rocks, as we call them at XIPN. We use EOS, the entrepreneurial operating system here. So we talk about goals in terms of rocks. We each then set a rock that helped us drive towards that shared team priority and our individual priorities as well. And so that's just what I do in terms of retreat cadences. That was 3 hours. I split it over 2 days, or if I were doing it in one day, I would do the morning. We'd have a nice social lunch together, and I do that in the afternoon, and then I would call it a retreat.
yeah. Absolutely, absolutely. And if you're anything like XYPN, you can throw in a fun prom event at the end of one of the evenings as well. So that's
Something
always
with a costume.
absolutely, absolutely. And then just kind of piggybacking off of the goals here, Corey. How do you decide what's the most important goal for yourself?
Hmm. I think that's a really good question. And that is hard to answer. I would ask the series of questions that I put on that slide. I think
Mhm.
it needs to check off those boxes,
Yes.
and you need to adjust it if it doesn't. I would focus on that why and ask yourself what's the most important thing you need to do to get there. And then the last thing I would do is run it by other people. We don't always know, or it can be hard for us to find that focus and clarity for ourselves. So if you have that peer group, if you have access to a coaching relationship, or even if you just have family members who are willing to listen to you, that can be a great approach. That outside perspective can be really important in identifying things if you feel stuck and what your top priority is. I think the only other tip I would have there is to try coaching somebody else on it.
Mm.
Um, Coaching someone else is often one of the best ways for us to figure out our own problems. And so if you can talk through someone else's version of that issue, then that can really help you identify solutions to your own. I did this to my husband last night at the dinner table. I don't know that he was a huge fan, but I got great insight about a problem in my work.
See?
So I highly recommend that as well.
Absolutely, building those relationships is huge. And then, you talked about winning and celebrating wins today. How often should we celebrate wins? Should we celebrate every single win that we encounter, or should we pick and choose when we want to celebrate our wins?
Hmm. Yes, celebrate every time. Uh, all the
Good.
time, even the tiniest things. Doesn't have to be a huge celebration, though I do think it's important to build those moments in too. I think that's why we talk about point of pride, personal and professional, at the retreats that I do with my staff quarterly, because that gives us that long view of our progress and we can celebrate one another there. But even if it's those tiny things in day to day, I got up without snoozing my alarm today. That's a win, and
Mhm,
that's worth celebrating too. So even if it's just you being like, "Yay, me, I did it," or you taking yourself out to dinner to celebrate, or you buying yourself something that you have been wanting because you achieved a goal, all of those celebrations are important. And the day to day ones are especially essential.
mhm. Absolutely. Just celebrating the little wins here and there can go a long way. And just know that you are being successful and having that success. So just taking the time, celebrate those wins. That's huge, Corey. And one last question. I think this would be a good one to leave off on. If you want to highlight one takeaway from today or one final piece of advice, what would that be to give our audience?
I don't know that I made this explicit today, but I think I've touched on it in a variety of ways, and that is just to give yourself grace right now,
Hmm.
and to celebrate those tiny wins, to look for those little things, and to know how important those essentials are, because trying to achieve everything in a time like this is just going to be demoralizing. It is a
Hmm.
hard time to be a person, as I said, and having the self compassion to give yourself that grace is really important. If you aren't familiar with self compassion, it's different than self confidence or any of those kind of other factors that we normally think of. It's really giving yourself grace. And I would say make sure you do that now, especially if you aren't accomplishing goals in the way that you want, or your goals are smaller than you feel like they normally would be. It's okay. Every little step is important, and those tiny actions often make the most difference.
Absolutely. It's definitely a process. And thanks for all the insight today, Corey, and just answering all those questions as well. And as everybody can tell, we're getting to the top of the hour. So I did just want to mention that if anyone is interested in having a conversation with myself or another member of the XYPN sales team, please follow the link in the chat to find a time that works best for you folks. And also, when you do click back to the lobby, you'll see a feedback survey pop up when you're leaving the webinar. So please, when you get a moment, we'd really appreciate if you folks could complete that just to know what you thought about the webinar. Again, Corey, if
Totally.
you have anything else you want to mention or add, please feel
I
free.
just wanted to share that if you are a member or if you're interested in becoming a member, there is a ton of new stuff rolling out in advisor education this
Mhm.
quarter. I talked a little bit about my coaches, but in 2022, we have a whole new model. Coaching and consulting are available with all four coaches. And we are rolling out webinars where you can come listen in to coaching expertise, workshops where you can come practice skills with one another and with our coaches, and then sprints, which are based on agile development sprints where you really show up and do the work in that small group coaching setting. So we're really excited about the year that we have ahead of us and are hoping that that will serve the needs of our members and any new members who are interested in joining the network.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's been great just to see how that advisor education team has transformed over the last couple of years, especially to meet the needs of our members. So, again, Corey, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we really hope to see you again next month when Alan Moore is going to be putting on his webinar. Thanks again, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
See everyone.